Amarinthos and the rest of southern central Greece was bombed by Nazi German airplanes on April 6, 1941, the day after Hitler had declared war on Greece. The bombings continued for days as the planes headed north to the village of Florina in the province of Macedonia on April 9. On April 18, Alexander Korizis, the Prime Minister of Greece, committed suicide by shooting himself as Nazi German troops marched towards Athens while the city was placed under martial law. Korizis decided that he would rather be dead than be caged like an animal by the hands of Hitler and his Nazi soldiers. Unsurprising. Greece's national motto is, after all, freedom or death. About 3 days later, Nazi troops in tanks infiltrated central Greece, including the town of Amarinthos, bringing with them death, mayhem, and destruction. The Nazis left after having burnt down area buildings, homes, and businesses. My father still remembers the day the Nazis invaded his hometown. He was just weeks away from turning 7 years old. Occasionally, he would briefly describe how he saw the German planes flying high above him, dropping their bombs. Weeks later, they would return marching into town alongside their tanks, burning everything in sight. The ravages of both the Nazi invasion of Greece, followed by the Greek Civil War, has left my father and his siblings with lifelong psychological scars. They still retell us their childhood memories of playing soccer with white skulls instead of white and black soccer balls and fighting over army boots, which they took off the feet of dead soldiers that littered the streets. Disturbing. Fortunately, my mother and her 2 older sisters were spared such devastations of war, although they too were scarred by the unexpected death of their 35-year-old mother in 1940, who died of a thyroid operation gone wrong. Consequently, my mother, who was 2 years old at the time, and her sisters were separated from their father. My mother's maternal aunt and godmother, Anna, along with my mother's maternal grandmother, Maria, decided that it was best that the girls be raised by them instead of their father and his mother. Ultimately, they came to Quebec City for a better life. On a side note, my mother still remembers how her mother looked, sounded, walked, and moved about, even though my mother was only a toddler when her mother died. My father would occasionally recount the story about how his father and his 2 paternal uncles, Christos and Apostolos, fought the Turks in Smyrna during the Greco-Turkish War in the early 1920s. Only his father survived. My father was not born when it had happened, but would hear his paternal grandfather, Costa Angelis, tell him the story whenever my father had stopped by to visit him as a young child. My father's favorite war story as a child and as an adult was how General Theodoros Kolokotronis won the Battle of Derinakia in 1821, which took place during the Greek War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire. Papu Costa died when my father was 16 years old. My father was incredibly sad and heartbroken after his beloved Papu died, as they were extremely close and had a relationship that was more like father and son instead of grandfather and grandson. Although my father loved hearing and reading about war stories, he did not like fighting in them, particularly when he lost so many relatives to war. His maternal uncle, Costa Baraboutis, was killed by communist rebel forces during the Greek Civil War in the late 1940s when my father was still a young adolescent. His uncle's death still deeply affects him today. My younger brother Peter would always overly embellish the story about our granduncle's death by the hands of the communists by claiming that his corpse was found hunched over his donkey, which eventually made its way back on its own to our home village. Sensationalism. My father was more of an intellectual than the physical, fighting type. Nevertheless, my father enlisted in the Greek armed forces after finishing high school, as it was part of the mandatory requirement of all male Greek citizens living in Greece. After my father completed his first year of military training, he was fortunate enough, thanks to friends in high places, to finish his enlistment as a military police officer. His younger brother Paul, whom he played with since childhood and worked together on their father's farm after classes, could not be drafted into the armed forces as he was designated as medically unfit to serve. Uncle Paul still managed to serve his country by working as a parachute tester. He would jump out of airplanes, making sure that the parachutes operated properly. In addition to getting paid, he received free cigarettes, which he gave to my father since he didn't smoke. Their older brothers, Costa and Christo, had already left Greece at that time, serving as part of the Greek military in Korea. Greece was the fifth largest contributor to the United Nations forces during the Korean War. Both Uncle Costa and Christo were granted Canadian citizenship for their contribution to the Korean War, fighting alongside Canadian armed forces. After the Korean conflict, Uncle Costa went to reside in Montreal, while his brother Christo went to live in Brussels. Uncle Christo eventually made his way to the Montreal neighborhood of Park Extension to Hutchinson Street near St. Joseph Boulevard, where he caught up with his brother Costa. They lived in the same house, got married to Greek women from their home village, had children in Canada, and ran their restaurant businesses. Cliché. Their younger brother Paul soon joined them a couple of years before my father arrived in 1963. Their youngest brother Bill was the last to arrive in Montreal in 1967. Their two sisters never left Greece as they had married and had children who remained in the country. Uncles Paul and Bill came back to Montreal with brides, and Uncle Costa remained indefinitely with his wife and two daughters to take over the family farm as my grandfather, Dimitrios, was unable to continue to do so due to his advanced age. Uncles Paul and Bill, along with their new brides, would eventually leave Montreal in 1969 and 1970, respectively, to live in New York. Uncle Christo and his wife Sophia, along with their daughter Dimitrios, who shortly died thereafter, and two daughters, Panagiota and Maria, or Betty and Margie, respectively, stayed in Montreal with my father. My father married my mother Nicole in 1969 after he met her at a university dance for Quebec students the year before. Unlike my father's sisters-in-law, my mother had been living in Canada for many years and as a result had become assimilated with Quebecers, first Francophones and then Anglophones. My mother moved to Montreal from Quebec City after having graduated from the predominantly French Université Laval at the top of her class to seek better nursing job opportunities. Valedictorian. When my mother's Aunt Anna came to visit her in Montreal, she was introduced to my father. Aunt Anna, who was a French teacher, gave my father her blessing to marry my mother. My mother was not too keen on marrying my father, but she felt pressure to accept his marriage proposal because Aunt Anna's approval of him and because Aunt Anna reminded my mother of her age and that she was not getting any younger. My mother was 30 years old at the time, and no one else had come forward to propose to her. My mother ultimately accepted to marry my father because she wanted children. 9 months after my parents married, I was born. My brother, Panagiotis, or Peter, was born 13 months after me, and we had all lived on Hutchinson Street near St. Joseph Boulevard with my uncles and their wives. During that time, our father drove a taxi and owned a grocery store, or dépanneur, as they called them in Quebec, since people in the neighborhood depended on these overpriced stores to help them out when they are running low on cigarettes, beer, and other grocery items. He eventually landed a job as a sous chef at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in downtown Montreal. He remained a sous chef at the Queen Elizabeth until early 1977, when we left Montreal for New York City because of the change in Quebec's political landscape. The political landscape in Quebec started becoming unstable with the Front de Libération du Québec, FLQ, terrorist crisis in October 1971. It reminded our father of the Greek Civil War back in the mid-1940s. In 1976-77, the political situation had gotten worse after the separatist party Québécois, PQ, got elected for the first time in October 1976. They did not waste any time in proceeding with the radicalization of the already existing Quebec Charter of the French Language, or Bill 101, which severely restricted the use of English and other languages in businesses, in schools, and in public. The newly elected PQ had gone so far as to establish l'Office Québécois de la Langue Française, to monitor and discipline those who broke the language laws through hefty fines and even shutting down businesses. This government agency, which still exists today, has been termed the French language police by the American media. For our father and other non-Francophone residents in Quebec, Bill 101 was the straw that broke the camel's back. The French language police reminded our father of the Greeks in the northern province of Macedonia who were imprisoned after they got caught using Bulgarian in public after the Second World War. Fascists. Our father was disappointed with what was happening to residents of Quebec who were not Francophones. Back in 1968, our father had attended one of Pierre Trudeau's public rallies as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and was swayed by his promises for a better and just society for all Canadians. Our father had even hoisted Trudeau up onto his shoulders as everyone was cheering and chanting, "Trudeau, Trudeau, Trudeau." Years later, our father had grown tired and restless over the anti-Anglophone and anti-allophone sentiments brewing in Quebec. He did not have anything against the Francophones. In fact, he chose to return to Montreal after having moved to Windsor, Ontario, to study at the University of Western Ontario for a semester. He missed the European cultural environment and joie de vivre, joy of living, that permeated urban Quebec. The dancing, the liberal Francophone women, the food. He did not care for Quebec's politics, however. Even today, several decades later, the words of French President Charles de Gaulle, shouted from the balcony at Montreal City Hall during Expo 67, still give him an earache. Vive le Québec libre! Long live a free Quebec! Instigator. Our father has always believed that Quebec was already free and liberated. The fact that Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau supported Quebec's sovereignty, albeit quietly, further irked our father. Drapeau never actively voiced his support for Quebec's separation as mayor, but his municipal policies clearly revealed his true colors since they were in tandem with those of PQ leader René Lévesque. Policies aside, our father did not view Mayor Drapeau seriously as he agreed with Drapeau's opponents that the Montreal mayor was cartoonish and over the top in everything that he said and did, simply to prove that Montreal was a bigger and better city than Toronto. Caricature. Drapeau was always trying to prove to himself and to others in the world that he was the biggest and best mayor in the world. Overcompensation. He behaved very much the way that some men do when they purchase and drive flashy luxury cars. We all know what that means. In any case, our father had enough. It was time to leave Quebec, especially since Trudeau failed to deliver on the promises that he had made just 8 years earlier. It was no longer a question of whether we should stay in Quebec, because that decision had already been made, but where to go from here. Our father did not like Ontario as it was too conservative and lackluster, and so the only other viable option was the United States of America. He had tried to enter the U.S. 3 times before when he was still single, but each time he was denied entry because the American government had already filled its quota for the year. By the time our father tried again a 4th time, the U.S. government abolished its quota system. Furthermore, now that he was married to our mother, who was a nurse, it was much easier to get residency cards, or green cards, for all 4 of us as the U.S. government wanted and needed educated professionals to immigrate to the America. Also, our father now had a family support system in New York City. His brothers and his kumbaros, Peter, who was my brother's godfather, or nonos, as we say in Greek. My earliest memory as a child was returning to Montreal with my parents and brother after having visited Uncle Bill in New York City in 1971. Even though I was only 18 months, I still remember that day very vividly. I was holding our mother's right hand as we were walking down the stairs from my uncle's apartment while she was carrying my 5-month-old brother in her left arm. Our father and uncle were waiting for us out front in my uncle's car, which I recall being either a great Pontiac or Ford Mustang. Uncle Bill was driving us to the airport so we could catch our flight back home to Montreal. 6 years later, my parents, brother, and I left Montreal for good, or so we thought, to live in New York City. Part 5. New York, home of the Statue of Liberty, a symbolic gift from France to the United States of America. The engraved inscription at the feet of the statue is a clear indication of what America is supposed to be. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door, not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. New York City is home to more than 8 million people. Unlike Montreal, New York City welcomes all immigrants and offers them real hopes, dreams, and opportunities to succeed if one has ambition and is willing to work hard and contribute to American society. Throughout its history, New York City has been a principal entry point for immigration to America. It continues to be by far the leading metropolitan gateway for legal immigrants admitted into the United States. New York City is the largest city in the United States with a population defined by a long history of global immigration. There is no other ethnically diverse city in the world. The term melting pot was coined to describe the densely populated immigrant neighborhoods in the city's Lower East Side. The city, at 36%, has the third largest proportion of foreign-born residents, after Los Angeles and Miami, respectively. As many as 800 languages are spoken in New York, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. Although English remains the most widely spoken language, not only in the city, but also the entire English-speaking world. Immigration from Europe started in the 19th century, with another major influx in the early 20th century. Caucasians of non-Hispanic origin still make up 35.1% of New York City's population, with much of them claiming Italian, Irish, German, Russian, Polish, British, and Greek ancestry. Greek immigration to New York City began mainly in 1890 and continued until about 1917 through Ellis Island. The push factors for Greek immigration were the Balkan Wars and World War I. Greeks again began to arrive in large numbers, about 450,000, after 1945, as they fled the economic devastation caused by World War II and the Greek Civil War. Many of them worked in industrial labor jobs, while others created a niche in the fur business. After 1945 and up until 1982, smaller numbers of Greeks, about 211,000, immigrated to New York City, which has the largest concentration of Greeks in the northeastern United States. These smaller numbers of Greek immigrants helped revive the Greek culture and identify among the earlier Greeks that arrived before them and had assimilated into the American way of life. Currently, residents of Greek descent make up 1% of New York City's population. Hispanics or Latinos make up 27.5% of New York City's population, with Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Mexicans, Ecuadorians, Colombians, and Salvadorians being the largest subgroups respectively. Blacks, or African Americans, make up a quarter of the city's population, with the majority coming from Jamaica, Guyana, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago. Jewish Americans make up about 16% of the New York metropolitan area population. The city has more Jewish residents than Tel Aviv and is the second largest Jewish population outside of Israel, partly due to the large arrival of Jewish immigrants, Ashkenazi, Bukharian, and Georgian from the former Soviet Union. Asian Americans make up 12% of the city's population, with the overwhelming majority stemming from China. Native Americans and Arabs, the majority being Lebanese and Syrian, each make up about 0.5% of the city's population, while multiracial residents make up 2%. When we arrived in New York City in the late 1970s, we did not move in with either of my uncles or my brother's godfather, as our mother grew tired of living in cramped quarters as we did in Montreal. Our mother wanted our own place, but we could not afford to live in the Greek middle-class neighborhood of Astoria in the borough of Queens, so we moved into a second-floor apartment on 116th Street near First Avenue in Spanish Harlem, also known as East Harlem, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where the Puerto Rican and Italian immigrants lived. I remember living beneath the apartment of an Italian couple, Joseph and Grace, who had a heavy-set daughter named Christy with a talking parrot. I also remember shopping with our mother at the outdoor street market located underneath the railroad overpass just outside our home. Even though we did not live in Astoria, we would often go there to visit family and friends. The Greeks from mainland Greece began moving to Astoria in large numbers in the 1960s. Immigrants from the island of Cyprus began moving there in 1974 because of the Turkish invasion. Before the 1960s and 1970s, the Dutch and Germans had settled in Astoria in the 17th century, with the Irish settling in during the 19th and early 20th centuries, followed by the Italians in the mid-20th century, with the Jews arriving in the early 1900s. While the population of Greeks in Astoria was 22,579 in 1980, it dropped to 18,127 by 1990 due to decreased immigration and lower birth rates. Astoria's demographics began to change with the Arab population growing, mostly from Egypt, Syria, Yemen, Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria, as well as those from Brazil, Albania, Bulgaria, Bosnia, Spain, and Bangladesh. Despite the vast diversity of ethnic cultures, Greeks still make up the largest concentration of residents in Astoria today, as evident by the countless Greek restaurants, bakeries, taverns, cafes, and Greek Orthodox churches. In the 1970s and 1980s, our father would sometimes bring us to St. Irene Greek Orthodox Church in Astoria instead of the one near our home. All the Greek reception halls were in Astoria, too, which was where all our relatives and friends' big fat weddings and baptismal celebrations were held. Our father would also bring us to Astoria to eat at a Greek restaurant, usually after having seen a Greek movie at the neighborhood's movie theater. If we were running late, he would order us souvlaki sticks from the street vendor. Occasionally, he would treat us to McDonald's or pizza with anchovies, or even Chinese food like shrimp fried rice. When my brother and I got tired of watching Greek movies, our mother would take us to see Hollywood ones in Forest Hills, Queens, and in Midtown Manhattan. We also went to see the circus at Madison Square Garden, the Christmas shows on Broadway and Radio City Music Hall, and even classical music concerts at Carnegie Hall, followed by a stop at Burger King on the way home for hamburgers, French fries, onion rings, and soft drinks. Other than the Rocky movies with Sylvester Stallone, our father, who is a huge fan of American boxers, both real and fictional, does not like American films, not even when the story is about Greeks. He took great offense in particular to the Aristotle Onassis cinematic biography titled The Greek Tycoon, released in 1978, as he felt that the Americans who made and would see the movie did not and would not fully understand the pain and suffering that the wealthy Greek shipping magnate went through in his life, particularly regarding the loss of his son in an airplane accident in 1973. Our father believes that Onassis is continuously portrayed by non-Greeks as a caricature and an exaggeration to be made fun of, despite having married former U.S. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. Onassis' daughter Christina did not like Jacqueline, as she felt that Jacqueline brought a death curse to the Onassis family. Christina felt that it was too much of a coincidence that everyone related to Jacqueline died early: her husband John, her brother-in-law Robert, her son John Jr., and her stepson Alexander. My family and I only stayed in Spanish Harlem for a year, as my parents managed to save enough money for a down payment on a house located 13 kilometers or 8 miles southeast of Astoria, but still in the borough of Queens. Our neighborhood, which was in the 11432 zip postal code area, had a large assorted population consisting of Salvadorans, Colombians, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, Haitians, Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Grenadians, Greeks, Irish, Polish, Russians, and Italians, coexisting together in peace and solidarity. One of the Italians living in our neighborhood was the Cuomo family. At that time, Mario Cuomo was running for mayor of New York against Ed Koch. Cuomo lost the election for mayor, but ended up becoming governor of New York State in 1983, a position he occupied for 3 terms before losing his attempt at a 4th term to George Pataki in 1995. In 2010, Cuomo's oldest son, Andrew, got elected as New York governor. By the time we left our neighborhood in Queens in 1985, the area had increasingly become a settlement for the Bangladeshis who had moved in as everybody else was moving out due to an increase in burglaries and muggings brought on by the crack cocaine epidemic of the mid-1980s. But back in the late 1970s, the neighborhood was a nice, working-class, family-friendly environment. Our mother was still working as a nurse at the Interfaith Hospital in Queens until she landed a better-paying job in the emergency room of the Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, which was the source of all her weird and gross stories at the dinner table every night. Aside from the bizarre, gory, and sensational stories she got to tell from her shift at the ER, including meeting celebrities like Christopher Reeve, Mary Tyler Moore, and Donnie Most from Happy Days, she benefited from being well paid with generous benefits and a hefty pension. The hospital was located 24 kilometers or 15 miles from home and took an hour to get there by subway. She had even made some good friends, mostly Filipino men and women who hosted huge parties at their homes, to which we were fortunate enough to get invited to and eat delicious Filipino food at. Delightful. The downside to having a mother as a nurse was that every time I got sick, she would administer intramuscular injections into my buttocks. Nightmares. Both our mother and father, as well as our school teachers and religious mentors, instilled in my brother and me a sense of consideration and respect for others. Our mother was more a career woman than a domesticated one. Nevertheless, she was still very dedicated to being an active, hands-on parent, despite her lack of cooking skills and passion for house cleaning. Our mother was not the only woman of her generation that was not domesticated. Uncle Christo's wife, Sophia, was not particularly skilled in cooking, even though she still lived at home with both of her parents until she got married. Uncle Christos and Aunt Sophia's daughters did not miss out on eating good food, given that Uncle Christos was an experienced cook with his own restaurant. Our father also worked in Midtown Manhattan as a head chef at the New York Hilton Hotel. He eventually lost his job after he got into a fight in the kitchen with an insubordinate sous chef from France, questioning our father's cooking skills by insulting him. Any discussion about our father's cooking was off limits, as he felt that he had earned his place in the kitchen, having worked his way up from under the strict commands and often harsh criticisms of his former French boss back in Montreal at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. In retrospect, it became obvious that the French sous chef was intentionally provoking our father to get his job as head chef. Under the advice of our former neighbor Grace, our father decided to go into business for himself by purchasing 2 rental apartment buildings in the borough of Brooklyn on the Bay Ridge Sunset Park border. Bay Ridge was a primarily Irish, Italian, and Norwegian neighborhood with a sizable Greek population and a steady influx of Russians, Polish, Lebanese, and, to a lesser extent, Chinese. Bay Ridge is, at the time of this writing, represented in the New York State Assembly by Republican Nicole Maliotakis, the state's first elected Greek Orthodox American, and Democrat Alec Brooke Krasny, a Russian Jewish American born in Moscow. Sunset Park is also a mixed neighborhood mostly consisting of Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and Chinese, with modest amounts of other Hispanics, Christian Indians, and Norwegians living there as well. Our father also co-owned a private business importing coffee, shrimp, lobster, and tomatoes under the moniker Amarinthos Corporation, named after his hometown in Greece. On several occasions, our father would bring my brother and me with him when he went soliciting potential clients, finalizing orders, and exploring new partners to expand the business. His partner, oddly enough, was not Greek but Jewish. Our father suddenly lost his half of the business in 1985 after entering a legal dispute with his partner over the distribution of corporate profits. The judge sided with our father's Jewish partner, and consequently our father had to sell his half of the business to pay both his legal fees and those of his partner. Until this day, our father is very bitter over the loss of his share of the business and feels that he lost his case because his partner had a better lawyer who also happened to be Jewish, whereas our father's lawyer was Hispanic. A quarter century later, our father still neither likes or nor trusts Jewish lawyers. Thankfully, our father still had his rental properties in Brooklyn as his source of income. I still have a lot of memories and recollections growing up in New York City, including the famous blackout of 1977 and Ed Koch becoming mayor of New York City in 1978 and staying the mayor until 1989 when he lost to David Dinkins, the city's first black mayor. I also remember Jimmy Carter being president of the United States and seeing long lineups at the gas stations during the U.S. energy crisis. Carter would always be seen on television wearing sweaters and talking about conserving energy, while my parents always complained about the high electrical bills courtesy of the Con Edison Gas and Electrical Company, which, although regulated, always seemed to con its customers out of their money. Pun. These combined reasons are why, even today, I still turn off the lights, heat, and water and insist on driving a fuel-efficient car. Ingrained. I do not remember Carter's predecessor, President Gerald Ford, because I was too young to understand who he was. Still, our father would often speak of Ford and his vice presidential predecessor, Spiro Theodore Agnew, who was born in Baltimore, Maryland, to a Greek immigrant father and an American-born mother. Agnew's family name was originally Anagностopoulos, but his father had shortened the name upon coming to America from Gargaliani, Messenia, in Greece, although his family was originally from the island of Chios. Even though Agnew's name was Americanized, he was still raised as a Greek Orthodox Christian. Agnew was an inspiration to all Greeks in America, as it was proof that through hard work and determination that Greeks could climb up and become someone important in the United States. Our father and other Greeks in America never believed the criminal allegations made against Agnew associated with the Watergate scandal and feel that the then President Richard Nixon used Agnew as a scapegoat to avoid blame, which is why Agnew was forced to resign as vice president and be replaced with Ford in 1973. A year later, Nixon was impeached over his involvement in the Watergate scandal, paving the way for Vice President Ford's path to presidency. Again, I do not remember any of these events, but I learned about them from both our father and from my U.S. history classes in school. I do remember Carter campaigning for re-election against Ronald Reagan, while the American hostage crisis in Iran was constantly talked about on the news. They were eventually freed on January 20th, 1981, the first day Reagan took office, which was also my brother's 10th birthday. I remember our mother becoming overly anxious about Carter's proposed policy of reinstating the mandatory military draft. She was relieved when Carter lost the election to Reagan, who favored voluntary military enlistment. Years later, I clearly remember watching on live television the assassination attempt on President Reagan by John Hinckley Jr. in front of the Washington Hilton Hotel. I also remember Reagan's war on drugs, which is the reason why I remain drug-free and tobacco-free until today. His declaration of war on Grenada, his re-election victory in 1984, the rumors about his Alzheimer's disease, and even the media hoopla over his colon surgery. I remember Reagan being the one who ended the Cold War with the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union. Everybody around me at that time viewed him as a patriotic American superhero akin to Captain America. I also remember Bernhard Goetz being called a hero by many, including the news media, dubbing him the subway vigilante for shooting 4 young black men who tried to mug him on a New York City subway train in 1984. He was charged with attempted murder and other criminal offenses, but a jury acquitted him of all charges except for 1 count of carrying an unlicensed firearm for which he served 8 months. On a more personal level, I attended public school 95, PS 95, in Queens from kindergarten to the 5th grade, which was a short walk, about 0.5 kilometers or 0.3 miles away from my home. I was only sent home from school once, and that was because my kindergarten teacher was angry that I was using my left hand to cut paper with scissors instead of my right one. At that time, it was not considered appropriate to be left-handed, and so my mother had to pick me up from school early to teach me how to use my right hand. Stupidity. Aside from that one incident, I had never missed school, nor have I ever not done my homework. I excelled in reading out loud, spelling, and taking tests, which was not bad considering that before the age of 6 I did not speak fluent English, given that my first 2 spoken languages were Greek and French. I remember wanting to be a firefighter when I finished school, but my mother kept telling me no, as it was too dangerous a job. For my mother's sake, I reconsidered. My father wanted me to become a clergyman like my mother's maternal uncle, but I had my heart set on becoming a dentist. I had grown to love science, and in fact, I had always made these sophisticated science projects for school, like a functioning bridge made mostly from papier-mâché, exploding volcanoes, and a replica of a pumping heart. Geek. I was often teased by my classmates and called a goody-goody or teacher's pet, although the wiser kids became my friends and would ask me to help them study and review their homework. I was even bullied by this Caucasian boy called Patrick, but that was short-lived as Edward, one of my 3 best friends at the time and of Haitian descent, told his older brother about him, who in turn put a stop to Patrick's bullying. My only other 2 friends were Gregory and Carlos, who were black and Hispanic respectively. I graduated the 5th grade with perfect school attendance. I was also valedictorian of my class and was rewarded by my mother with my first adult watch, a digital Seiko with alarms and all other kinds of sophisticated functions, to replace my Mickey Mouse children's watch. My younger brother Peter, who was 2 grades lower than me, also attended PS 95 and was continuously on the honor roll for his impeccable grades. After finishing the 5th grade at PS 95, I attended Immaculate Conception School, a private Catholic elementary school that ended with the 8th grade. My brother left PS 95 early and transferred over with me to Immaculate Conception as our mother wanted us to be in the same school together. Even though he got accepted, my brother did not go to St. Gerard's Magella Catholic School, which was 1.5 kilometers or 1 mile away from our home, where Governor Cuomo's oldest son Andrew went to school, because my grades in mathematics were not high enough for St. Gerard's admission requirements. It should be noted that St. Gerard's had since closed its doors to students permanently. Governor Cuomo's youngest son, Chris, was attending Immaculate Conception and was in my brother's class. Even though Chris was in my brother's class, I did get to speak to him regularly, usually when we were in line waiting our turn to buy ice cream from the truck that was parked outside our school every spring afternoon. Chris was a very approachable, down-to-earth guy. You never would have known that his father, Mario, was governor of New York because Chris never let that fact influence the way he treated everyone. Pleasant. Of course, Chris's attitude and treatment of others was not really surprising to me since he was of Sicilian descent. Since ancient times, the early Sicilian inhabitants, who were called the Sicani, intermarried with the early Phoenician nomads from Greece. In about 750 B.C., the Greeks from mainland Greece began to live in Sicily after Greece had colonized the island. The native Sicanis adopted the Greek culture with relative ease, including the pre-Christian Greek religion and temple building. Even the politics of Sicily were intertwined with that of Greece. Greece began to make peace with the Roman Empire in 262 B.C. and allowed the Romans to annex Sicily as their republic's first province. Despite the transfer of Sicily to Rome, Greeks have remained on the island. Today, Sicilians can trace their genetic and cultural heritage to the Greeks that settled in Sicily during the ancient times, but also the Byzantine era. A sizable minority of Sicilians of Greek descent still speak a distinctive dialect of Greek called Greco. In many ways, Greeks and Sicilians share the same history and same genetic DNA. This is one of the reasons why my cousin Betty did not have any problems marrying a Sicilian. Our father would get a kick about how his younger son got better grades in school than the governor's youngest son. Until this day, our father blames our mother for moving us back to Montreal and depriving his sons of having that opportunity to become successful like Chris, who is currently a television journalist at CNN, but also a licensed attorney, or his older brother Andrew, the current governor of New York State. Our father always knew that in Quebec our ethnic heritage would be an impediment to attaining our maximum potential. My brother did well at Immaculate Conception. Getting good grades came easy to him. It took me longer to get decent grades. In fact, it took me a couple of years before I was able to adjust and keep up with my classmates who were accustomed for many years to the higher standard of education that came with learning in a private school. I was teased by some of the kids and was called dumb. The teasing got so bad that word got around school that I was retarded. The truth of the matter was that I was simply a quiet guy who kept to himself. Introvert. Our father and his side of the family told me that I took after my paternal grandfather, who was a quiet and profoundly serious man. Although some girls would pity me about the teasing at school, they would still speak to me as if I were developmentally slow. Annoying. Regardless, I was still able to make a few friends. Edmund, Adrian, Alexis, and Reggie, who were of Filipino, Russian, white Hispanic, and Haitian descent respectively, and even won over a couple of female admirers, Nicole and Lisa, whom were both black. The former would follow me everywhere I went from a distance. Stalker. Although not extremely popular, I had managed to play baseball, always left field, and football, always quarterback, with the other kids at school after classes. Like in grade school, I was bullied by Eric, this Hispanic boy at school who was the same age as me but was in a lower grade because he had to repeat. It was only after I had graduated the 8th grade when I was able to return to Immaculate Conception with my friends from high school to end Eric's bullying of the other kids. Even my brother, who was still attending Immaculate Conception, noticed a change in Eric's behavior. My brother was the cool, popular one at school, but also on the street that we lived on. During the summer and on weekends, the kids on our street would play cops and robbers, superheroes and villains, tag, hide and seek, football and dodgeball with my brother and me. I was included in the games because of my brother's popularity. Piggyback. One of the factors behind my unpopularity was that I was not a very stylish dresser, as I was forced to wear nerdy, striped, checkered or polka dot pants or shorts by my mother because her cousin gave them to me as presents. Wearing those tacky gifts to play outside got me the nickname Pants. When the teasing got bad, I took refuge in my bedroom with my stamp collection, my comic book collection, and watching shows and movies from the 1960s and 1970s on television. Thank God for Catholic school uniforms that spared me from some of the teasing over my pants. A couple of families on our street sent their kids to the same Catholic school that my brother and I attended, and so we would get to see these same kids, the Manucci children, whose family were originally from Peru, along with Randy and Andy, the Puerto Rican brothers, practically every day of the week. Once a week, my brother and I took piano lessons through private teachers at home. My brother eventually switched over to acoustic guitar. My brother and I did not go to the St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Christian private school south of the Grand Central Parkway, about 3 kilometers or 2 miles away from home. Also, our mother did not like that school as much as she did Immaculate Conception, which was just north of Hillside Avenue and only 1 kilometer or 0.7 miles away from home. The Greek couple in our neighborhood, Costa and Calliope, sent their 3 children, Nick, Adonis, and Maria, to St. Demetrius every weekday with the school bus. My brother and I only attended St. Demetrius for Sunday school. Every so often, we would attend liturgy services at Easter time with the Greek Cypriot Zacharoudis family, who lived across the street from us. Members of their family, Zacharias, Helene, and their 3 adult children, Astrades, Homer, and Iphigenia, would also help my parents out by babysitting my brother and I or help us do needed house repairs. It was Mrs. Zacharoudis who registered me for kindergarten as my parents were both working at the time. The Zacharoudis family was also kind enough to allow us to stay at their home after my brother Peter burned down our kitchen on the morning of Easter Sunday, 1980, while playing with his Easter candle from the night before. Thankfully, no one got hurt, and Uncle Christos was able to repair and replace the cabinets in our kitchen fairly quickly. Later that year, my brother and I discovered that Santa Claus did not exist, after my brother found the Christmas presents that our mother bought and hid in the house. Even though we knew that Santa did not exist in real life, our mother would still buy us toys at Christmas time. Star Wars, Star Trek, the Bionic Man, the Incredible Hulk, the Lone Ranger, Buck Rogers, Stretch Armstrong, Atari, Legos, Slinky, and Rubik's Cube. My brother and I were not spoiled during the year, but my mother would reward us at Christmas and on our birthdays. Aside from the Monopoly board game which he bought and played with us, our father did not buy us toys, but chose instead to give us money at Christmas and on our birthdays, but never as much as Uncle Christos did. And throughout the year, to make us ambitious and successful at schools like the Zacharoudis children, who at that time were studying medicine, mechanical engineering, and corporate law, respectively. Meanwhile, my brother and I were studying and learning the Greek language 2 afternoons a week after regular day school. but only for the 4th and 5th grades, which my brother and I attended together at the same time. Our father homeschooled us for the previous grades, as the schedule for Greek school conflicted with his working hours. I still remember my brother and I pulling pranks on our father while being homeschooled by him, like the time we told that we were tired of reading from Greek textbooks and that we were going to eventually rip the pages out. We would then proceed to wait for him to step out of our living room where we studied and quickly rip pages and pages of blank writing paper. Rip. Our father would rush back into the room screaming and yelling angrily, thinking that we went through with our threat. Hilarious. As my brother and I got older, we were able to walk to Greek school on our own. Even though our father homeschooled us, we did extremely well, above average, when compared to the other Greek kids in our class. Our teachers were impressed. My brother got straight A's, with me coming close behind with B pluses. At that time, Greek language classes ended with the 5th grade, but we continued to learn about our cultural heritage through self-studies and maintaining Greek customs with friends and relatives in the New York City area during holidays. Every year, on the Sunday after March 25th, my brother and I would march in the Greek Independence Day Parade with other Greek Americans on 5th Avenue in Manhattan from 64th Street to 79th Street, always wearing the traditional Greek tsolias attire, which looked similar to the Scottish Highland clothes with the kilt, but the Greek outfit included a red cap, a red or blue vest, a white shirt, white stockings, and a white skirt. My brother and I always wore the Greek traditional costume at the Greek Independence Day Parade, regardless of how cold it was. Patriotism. I still remember fondly how my parents, brother, and I would visit my brother's godfather, Peter Dukas, and his wife and children to celebrate Greek holidays and eat delicious homemade food in the mid-1970s, even though he was not my godfather. Peter Dukas would still treat me like his own godson, buying me clothes and toys, including my first G.I. Joe doll. He knew that my godfather was back in Montreal. By the late 1970s, when my father's two brothers, Christos and Bill, had settled in New York City after arriving from Montreal and Greece, respectively, we would go celebrate Christmas, New Year's, American Thanksgiving Day, and Orthodox Easter at their homes again with delicious food, roast lamb, deer, turkey, roast potatoes, salad, green beans, bread, feta cheese, olives, and various desserts. Both Uncle Christos and Uncle Bill were chefs who owned and managed restaurants. Uncle Christos had his restaurant in Brooklyn in the Red Hook area, a few blocks away from the docks, where the majority of his clients came to eat breakfast and lunch on weekdays. Uncle Bill had his first restaurant in Manhattan, where I would be Uncle Bill's backup busboy whenever he needed one. I still remember listening to the jukebox at Uncle Bill's, which people continuously dropped coins to listen to disco music, early rap music, and later on new wave and pop from the early 1980s. They were the same songs that I had heard over and over again the summers that I went to Greece. In addition to family get-togethers in New York City, we also went on summer trips a few times to Greece to visit relatives. Going to Greece was not all fun and games. We would go visit important historical landmarks across the country, but also take in a Karagios's satirical shadow puppet show derived from fictional Turkish folklore when Greece was under Ottoman rule, often accompanied by either my cousins, Christo or Ellen, the younger children of my aunt Katerina. Her oldest child, Dimitrios, was serving in the Greek Air Force as a pilot. The important Greek landmarks that we visited included Athens, Sparta, and Olympia, to name a few. Culture. The first time we had gone to Greece was the summer of 1979 with Olympic Airways, Greece's national carrier at the time. It was the year after my paternal grandmother, or Iya, died. I remember seeing our father crying in our backyard in Queens after he found out over the phone that Iya died in Greece. It was the first time that I had seen him cry. I did not see him cry or get emotionally upset when his father died the year before in 1977. Our father had not seen his parents since he left Greece in 1953, although they did write to each other regularly. They were unable to phone each other since there was only one family in the coastal town of Amarinthos that had a telephone at that time. Back then, phones were not easy to come by, and when one was located, phone calls were extremely expensive. Before 1979, our father could not afford plane tickets to return to Greece, let alone bring us with him. The political instability did not help matters much either. By 1979, our father was able to return to Greece and has done so almost every summer since. We went to Greece a second time in 1980, again with Olympic Airways. We went to Greece a third time in 1982, this time with KLM as flights to and from Canada were canceled due to cost-cutting measures by the managers of Olympic Airways. Flights were ultimately restored in 1984. When we were in Greece, we split our time between Uncle Costa, Aunt Jennifer, and Uncle Christos at Uncle Costa's farm. We tended to his field, his sheep, and his pigs. We also went hunting for birds and wild rabbits with rifles in hand until Uncle Costa's dog, Torka, or Turk, which used to be our dog years before in New York City. At Aunt Jennifer's, who was widowed, her husband Costa died from a post-operative hospital-acquired infection, or nosocomial infection, as it is officially called, lived with her two sons, George, who taught me how to swim, and Demetrios and her daughter, Despina, who taught my brother and I how to tend to her chickens. We would ride her donkey north of town early in the morning to shake and gather the almonds from the trees. Around mid-August, Aunt Jennifer would bring us to the monasteries in the area during the day and then take us to the Panegyri, the outdoor festivals, during the evening to celebrate the commemoration of the Virgin Mary. Our time at Uncle Christo's beachfront house was our downtime from all the hard work, although we did have to climb the trees out front to pick fresh figs for my father. While our father continued to go to Greece every summer, our mother, brother, and I stayed behind, as our mother did not enjoy going back, nor did she like the idea of my brother and I going there without her. Paranoia. While our father went to Greece alone, our mother would keep us occupied in New York by taking us to visit her sister, whom she sponsored in the U.S. and ultimately settled in Brooklyn. Our mother also helped her other relatives, regardless of where they lived, by sending them money during times of need, many of whom went on to become respectable professionals like pediatrician, nurses, teacher, and corporate director. Our mother's grandmother, Maria, died in 1977 at the age of 97. I had only met her once when I was a young child. From what I remember, she was very mean, strict, and bossy. Our mother's father, Louis, who I had met only once as a young child, died 5 years later in 1982 at the age of 85. Our mother's Aunt Anna, who used to babysit us whenever she came over to stay for months at a time in both Montreal and Queens, died at the age of 86 in 1992. She and my brother did not get along, as Aunt Anna found my brother to be disrespectful of his elders, whereas he found her to be too supercilious and queenly. Our mother would always come to my brother's rescue from Aunt Anna's attempt to discipline him. Our mother would keep us busy every summer by taking us horseback riding and to the shooting range for target practice. It was not the same as going to Greece, but there were some similar experiences. Riding horses instead of donkeys, and shooting targets instead of birds and wild rabbits. I did manage to return to Greece on my own 2 decades later, after I had completed all my graduate studies, but before I started my career in the federal public service in Ottawa. Still, we got a good taste of Greece at home in Queens. New York, with the rooster, duck, and vegetable garden our father kept in our backyard. Needless to say, the rooster, duck, and vegetables ultimately made their way onto our dinner table. Barbecue. To further bond us with the Greek culture, our father would also sing old Greek songs in the car while driving whenever and wherever we commuted together. He had a bad habit of looking up at the sky while driving to see the airplanes taking off or landing as we passed by Kennedy or LaGuardia airports. The songs that our father sang were oldies from the 1960s and early 1970s, commemorating the hardship in Greece. Tapedia tu Piraea, the Piraeus Lads. Apone Zoe, hard-hearted life. Ime aitos horis fetera, I am a wingless eagle. Oniro dimino, anchored dream. Parme mia volta stofegare, let's take a ride to the moon. Braho ton kaimo mu, long yearning. Aina to helidoni, only one swallow. Dromos, rough road. Ta luia ke taharonia ta hamanya, words and years past and gone. Sine fiasemeni Kyriaki, cloudy Sunday. Acroia les delinea, sunset by the seaside. And Nihotse horis fegare, moonless night. My brother and I never fully got into those songs. Thankfully, by the end of the late 20th century and into the early 21st century, Greek music became cheerful with artists such as Lefteris Pantazis, who combined upbeat contemporary music with dark humor and the sarcasms of everyday life. Na plithe nuni ye nekes, let the women multiply. Sagapo re gamoto, I love you, damn it. Den me kata laves, you didn't understand me. Ime anexi yipto, I'm unexplainable. Zilevo, I'm jealous. Den exeris nagapas, you don't know how to love. Pathos muke iatriko, my passion for my doctor. And Paco Metro, parking meter. Greek music has come a long way. Hallelujah. In addition to going to Greece, we would travel around the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, as well as Pennsylvania. The only other place that we had gone to was the Caribbean island of Haiti for 2 weeks in 1977. At the time, Haiti had become a safer country to travel to for a vacation after Jean-Claude Duvalier, commonly referred to as Baby Doc, had taken over as president from his father, Francois Papa Doc Duvalier, who also happened to be a physician. Baby Doc had abandoned most of his father's terrifying aspects of the regime, winning over support from foreign countries despite his tendency for kleptocracy, embezzling public money for the personal gain of government officials, which left the residents of Haiti in poverty because of the government's culture of entitlement. I remember seeing much of the poverty, such as the poorly built homes, the badly maintained roads, and the women peddling ice cream from their baskets, which they carried on their heads while walking on the streets. For me, Haiti will always mean the place where I had watched a movie from France at a drive-in theater for the very first time. For my brother, Haiti is the place where he got incredibly sick for the first time after having drunk the water. Diarrhea. Thankfully, it only lasted for a few days. I had later learned that many Haitians had fled their native homeland in the late 1950s and early 1960s to escape the regime of Papa Doc, with most residents settling in the neighboring nations of the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and the United States, with most settling in New York City, Miami, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. Many residents immigrated further away from Haiti to France and Canada, and specifically in or just outside the province of Quebec. These immigrants from the mid-1960s until the early 1970s were typically educated professionals, physicians, professors, and civil servants, escaping persecution and oppression. Lower-class Haitians started leaving Haiti in the mid-1970s and only stopped leaving in 1986 when Baby Doc was ousted from power. After I graduated from the 8th grade in June 1983, my brother and I got our first paying summer job distributing flyers for a chimney cleaning company. The rest of the year we got allowance plus extra money for good grades, not to mention bribes from our father for cutting our hair, which he liked to keep short as if we were in the military, and pulling out loose teeth.